On January 21st, 1924, the leader of the Bolshevik Party in the Soviet state, Vladimir Lenin, dies.
January 1924. Dzerzhinsky, of course, planned to become the head of state, but this did not happen. Which meant that a struggle began between Dzerzhinsky and Stalin, which is a fact not very well known to us. And after one of the party meetings, Dzerzhinsky died. Yes, he left the meeting and died.
Within 2 years, Joseph Stalin removed his main rival Lev Trotsky from the Politburo and then from the country and took full control of the party and the state.
And in August 1940, Trotsky published an article in the United States in which he actually said that Stalin planned to poison Lenin. It was a sensational article. It was the first such open accusation against Stalin that he was most likely involved in Lenin's death.
Trotsky's article was published in Liberty magazine on August 10, 1940. On August 20th, NKVD agent Ramon Mercader stabbed Trotsky to death with an ice axe. July 1928. At the plenum of the Central Committee of the CPSU, Stalin stated that the dying classes would not voluntarily give up their positions without resistance, and that the class struggle would only intensify. This became the ideological basis for the so-called Great Terror, a period of large-scale repressions and mass executions, including the purge of the Bolshevik Party. At that time, Stalin begins accelerated industrialization, which required cheap or even free labor. The camp system of forced labor comes under control of the state security agencies. In 1934, the main directorate of correctional labor camps, the infamous Gulag, is created. From the 1930s to the 1950s, at least 20 million people experienced the Gulag camps, of whom 1,607,000 died. The extermination of people took place on a planned basis, according to Stalin's directives and orders. He personally set limits on executions and exile to the camps. During the so-called national operations, entire generations of the cultural elite of the peoples of the USSR were being destroyed.
At the same time, in 1930, mass repressions began against the Ukrainian non-communist intelligentsia, against the Ukrainian autocephalous church. That means genocide was being committed against the Ukrainian national group, and it was not limited to terror and starvation.
The famine of 1932-33 in the Soviet Union was one of the greatest humanitarian disasters of the 20th century. According to researchers, almost 10 million people in the USSR died in 2 years alone. In the North Caucasus, the Lower Volga region, Kazakhstan, there were approximately 3 million people killed. But Ukraine suffered the greatest losses from the Holodomor. According to available data, the death toll reached 4.5 million people.
And of course, as soon as Putin became president, yes, we all wondered how the whole country ended up so quickly in the hands of the former KGB and the FSB. It was so fast because all these people had long been in all these positions. We are talking about tens of thousands of people like Putin who were working in the civilian sector.
According to the Russian newspaper Novaya Gazeta, the share of security officials in the Russian political elite is almost 25%. The largest concentration of security officials is in Putin's inner circle.
They have this very reactionary regime that's run by a combination of KGB, former KGB people and current military officials and gangsters. So it's more like a kind of a mafia KGB consortium sitting on top of this big Russian imperial state. But it's so large that it's this very autonomous octopus in Russian society and in other countries.
In 2017, at a meeting of the Presidential Council for Culture and Art in the Kremlin, Putin makes this joke about the absent members of the council.
I feel that after the Czechist Day celebrations, not everyone gathered. Is anyone else still celebrating? It's okay, we'll see these comrades separately.
December 20th, 2017, the Grand Kremlin Palace. Celebrations are taking place on the occasion of 100th University of the Cheka. The entire Russian ruling elite gathered for the celebration. The monastic choir of the Sretensky Monastery congratulates on the Czechist Day. The monastery is isolated near the main KGB FSB building on Lubyanka Square. In the 1930s, the monks and priests of the monastery were shot by the NKVD, and the territory was used for garage as a dormitory and a prison. In 1938, the Soviet Union published the textbook History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, short course, created with the personal participation of Joseph Stalin.
Stalin's short course in the history of the Communist Party was a landmark event in the history of the Soviet totalitarian system, which had never seen textbooks in history before. Because when the Bolsheviks came to power, they destroyed and banned the history.
November 2003, Putin meets with historians and expresses his vision of what history textbooks should be like.
Modern textbooks, especially textbooks for schools and universities, should not become a platform for a new political and ideological struggle. After all, these textbooks should contain the facts of history. They should foster a sense of pride in our national history and in our country, especially among young people.
Standard operating procedure. It's the standard operating procedure for authoritarian regimes to rewrite history in order to indoctrinate citizens into the official propaganda line.
Putin's interest in rethinking history has become even more acute since the Orange Revolution in Ukraine.
He could not forgive Ukraine for Yushchenko. He could not forgive Ukraine for the revolution. And obviously, after that, the historic Russian-Ukrainian war began. And in response to the Orange Ribbon of 2004, in 2005, the St. George's Ribbon appeared and took on grotesque forms in Russia.
You know, Putin at one point said that one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century was the breakdown of the Soviet Union. And he still has this vision, which many Russian nationalists do, that Russia encompasses, you know, every territory that it ever occupied at one point in history. And this, unfortunately, is very deep in Putin's own historical imagination. And I think a lot of Russians believe some version of that they can't be Russia without dominating all of their neighbors. And unfortunately, that's the narrative about their national identity that they've accepted.